Soleyn from Dad Central. What's going on, brother? Good to see you.
Thanks so much, Larry. It's a great honor to be here and have this conversation with you. I remember listening to quite a few of your shows, and I think there are three that stood out. But I'm honored that I actually have the opportunity to have this conversation with you.
Well, you're in this world, man, doing very, very good work. And I really want to focus in on your story and why you're doing this work. And the reason I always like to start with somebody's childhood who's been on the show is because what I've noticed after almost over 1,000 episodes now is when men are doing work like you're doing, like I'm doing, it didn't start when they became a father. It started usually with the experience of their father or lack thereof. But you have quite a story. So I want you to share it.
Okay. Well, thank you for just the opportunity. This is a story that I haven't really told many people at all. And it really wasn't until I became a father or was starting to become a father that it even came to my mind. But I've learned since then how important it is to share. So with that sort of preamble, I'll get to the story. When I was 3 years old, my biological father abducted me. And so that really started a 49-month journey of him taking me and kind of running, and my mother doing everything that she could to try and find me and bring me back home. And that what that experience was just my father had, like many men, he was kind of broken and he made some bad choices and the relationship had broke down. My father was also, while I was and before I was taken, he was, verbally and physically abusive to my mother, and very, I guess, abusive, I guess, to me as a child, but I still loved him. My mom would tell stories of how I always wanted to go and spend the weekend with my dad, except for the weekend that kind of this all went down. I cried and cried and cried. He, she's like, you didn't want to go at all, which is very unlike you. And so, but I didn't know. So she let me go. And that was the last time she saw me for 4 years. But to bring the story to, sort of why I was 49 months is, eventually she did find me. But this was back in 1983 when it happened. There were no laws about parental abduction. And so when she would go to the police for help or anyone for help, they'd say, well, the child's father has him, so we're not going to do anything. And so she actually, after a year, knew where I was, spent the next 3 years, trying to legally bring me back home. And so we had moved from, Toronto, where I was born, to New York City for a little while. Then we moved to Jamaica for 2 years. Then we ended up in St. Louis, Missouri. And so in Missouri, my mom connected with a lawyer by the name of Bonnie Miller, and there was a police constable who really took up her case and really wanted to be an advocate and support her. And so what they ended up doing, I think it took them over a year, but they eventually got the laws changed in the state of Missouri to allow the state to come in and seize a child who didn't when a parent didn't have rightful custody in a different jurisdiction. So they took the custody order from Toronto or Canada and then somehow applied it to the laws in Missouri, which before they weren't able to do that. And so, one night I'm sitting with my dad and his girlfriend at the time. There's a knock at the door. And then, like, next thing you know, police are storming into the house. And so that night, all I remember is, a bunch of people in the house, little commotion. There was, I guess, a social worker, a psychologist, some people with me that they took me up to my room. You're gonna be coming with us for a little while. You need to get some clothing, get some stuff. And next thing you know, I was in the front of a police cruiser and I was traveling to a foster home, which I did. And so I spent the next couple nights in different foster homes. Lost my mom 4 years ago. Now I've lost my dad. I have no idea what's going on. And then eventually, on I think the third day, I was brought to a courthouse. So I remember the courthouse so distinctly. I was kind of in this cold, kind of white, like really stark place, and had a bunch of toys. I was just playing with those. Later on that day, they bring me to this room and they introduced me to this woman who I vaguely recognized her, but I didn't know her. But it was my mom. And so that was the first time I'd seen my mom in over 4 years. And literally the next day I was, on my way back to Toronto for the start of the rest of my life. And, that experience, as I said, I never really shared it. I buried it away. Life started at 7, back in Toronto, living my life, trying to, figure it out. And my mom was trying to figure it out. And she got remarried when I was 10. with a beautiful blessing, my stepdad, who's still in my life today. But yeah, that was the story that really I felt compelled to start to share when I get a little bit older, when I was becoming a dad. But that's that childhood experience that has really stuck with me and drives, I think, a lot of the passion that I have today for supporting fathers.
Wow. Take me back to the first time you laid eyes on your mom at 7 years old and what that experience was like for you. You know, you're this little boy. You just went through 3 days of foster care. You just saw, your cops storm into your dad's place with his girlfriend. You know, you're put in a car, you're taken into the foster care, space for taken into the foster care system for 3 days. Then you see your mom. What's going through your mind?
You know, I don't really remember much other than I had the sensation that I knew her,
Yeah,
right? Even she was familiar to me. Um, and I don't know the psychology. I'm a professional coach, but I don't necessarily know the psychology, like what goes on through childhood trauma. But I would imagine that there was a part of me that was like wanting desperately to like probably cling to her and say like, this is my mom, like I've missed her so much, but like emotionally I couldn't do that, because it's like, is this real, like what's going on here? This person hasn't been around. Do i can I even trust this? And so I think there was just a lot of just trying to figure this stuff out, as much as you can at 7 years old, which you really can't. And honestly, I think there was a feeling of like a little bit of helplessness. So
sure.
like, what do I do here now?
Yeah.
Like, what do I do with this? And um, yeah, so I think there was just a lot of trying to process and figure this stuff out.
So have you seen your dad since then?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Tell us about
Yeah.
that.
Well, the first time I think I saw my dad after that, I was probably maybe 12 or 13.
Wow. So like
And
7, 6, 7 years.
yeah, yeah, 6 or 7 years.
Yeah. Okay.
He'd been in, I think, contact with me through my mom. And, she never withheld an opportunity for him to contact me through letters or whatever he sent. But this was more of a surprise. Um, and I think, it was almost so what happened is my mom came upstairs just before I was actually going to be, and we live in an apartment at the time. I was going to be heading to school, and she came up, and I could tell there was something wrong with her. I was like, what happened? And it's like she didn't want to tell me. She's like, your dad was downstairs in the front of the building. Right. And so she was visibly scared. And so anyway, we talked about that. That was pretty traumatic, but that was, I think, the experience when I saw him a little bit. Um, but it was, I would say, numbing. Like you didn't really have much feelings, didn't know what to do with those feelings, actually, other than I could tell my mom was quite upset and I just wanted to comfort and support her.
So did he just show up?
Yeah, he just showed up.
Okay. And so she saw him and then, but did you have like an interaction with him at that point?
No
Okay.
interactions at that point. So, I mean, maybe the answer to the question better is, when was my first interaction with him? I was probably 13, and my mom and my stepdad at the time, they actually made the decision to, go for a trip, and they went to the trip to Lake of the Ozarks, Missouri, and let my dad know so that he could come and have a chance to interact with me. And so that was the first time I'd say I got to actually interact with him after everything had happened. And there was, and my parents were there, and so it was, structured, and it made sense, and it was safe, and all those other things. But he spent a lot of time talking to me and showing me pictures and saying, hey, here's other parts of your family, or here's other parts of your life, and here are experiences from you and I when you were younger. So it was actually a very positive experience. And the way that my mom and my stepdad chose to interact with him, was from a place of, I would say, grace and forgiveness, not not contempt, not fear, not anger. It was, he's your son. We know that's important, and we want to support that. And so it was a real positive experience to have that connection point, and to see and experience him.
And did you guys formulate a formal relationship ongoing?
Over the next few years through high school, like we were in touch. Mostly him sending me things. I was not, proactively reaching out to him. And this was before the days of smartphones, cell phones, texting, and none of that stuff. And it was all sort of through letters. The next experience was when I was 18. I actually went down to St. Louis with him because he had made a decision. He was going to move his life and his business back to where he's originally from, which is St. Vincent. It's an island in the Caribbean. And so I went down for a week, and I spent time helping him basically, pack up his business, pack up his life, and then we, drove most of it to New York so it could be shipped. And so that was a week long, intensive experience with him when I was 18. Again, interesting, enlightening. Learned a lot more about my dad. Learned a lot more about myself, what was possible, or what was he was capable of when it came to some form of relationship. And so interesting experiences for sure along the way, where I have reintegrated, and I do have a relationship today. We have, I think, a good relationship. I just sent him a text last week, showed him some pictures of the kids and where they're at and what's going on. And so we've had many times over the years to reconnect, to rebuild, or repair and rebuild, the relationship.
Wow. So, okay. Is now he does he still live in New York?
He lives in St. Louis.
Oh, he lives in St. Louis. Okay. I was
Yeah,
trying to like track her. Okay. And where do you still live in Toronto?
I'm about 2.5 hours east of Toronto,
Okay.
smaller town called Kingston, Ontario.
Okay. Where does he live in St. Louis? What city?
He was in Florissant last I recall, but I may not be up to speed on where he is.
I grew up there.
Did you? Yeah.
Yep. Grew up in Florissant. Yeah. Wow. That's okay. Well, I want to go back to your stepdad. He entered the picture. I'm looking at my notes here. You said at 10, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And you said that you really alluded to this beautiful positive experience with your stepdad. What made that? I'm putting myself in your shoes, and your life changes at 7 years old, big time, right? And not to mention the fact that as you rewind the tape as a little kid, you're like, wow, like those years with my dad, like I don't even know. It probably seemed quote unquote kind of normal at the time, but obviously you really reality starts to hit the older you get, and you're like, wow, that wasn't so normal. And then enter in this new man in your life, right? Who's now your stepdad, and the way you talk about him, you lit up, you smiled, talked about this great experience. There's a lot of people out there, a lot of men and daughters that when entered a stepdad, that's when a nightmare starts. But for you, it was the
Right.
opposite. So tell us about that.
I think the simplest way I can describe it is, he's just a very kind, patient, steady man. And, he has, a heart to serve. And I think that, character that he has, just came through in a probably very challenging circumstance. My mom, for all of her amazing qualities and strength, can also be very challenging to sometimes be in a relationship with. He is the rock, I would say, that I observed growing up in kind of the storms of life when they come. Nothing was going to shake him, no matter what it cost him, I would say. And so that example, that character, is something that I've just grown to appreciate over the years. I knew that no matter what happened, I could rely on him. And I think that builds trust. And, over time, when you have a child who has experienced, breaches of trust, that's one of the most important things to, create a solid relationship. I think it's crucial actually to have a healthy relationship is trust. And so I would say his ability to consistently show up and be there, just in his presence, in his loving, calm, kind, patient way, even in the face of some difficulties and challenges, just told me, okay, this is for real. He's here. And so I think I just grew to trust him. And over time that trust has just grown because he's proven himself very faithful, and very, true to his word. And that to me is just a powerful example. And it's something that I have benefited from, And it's something that I want to model as well,
Yeah.
as a dad, as a man, as just as a person. And so it just means a lot to me, how he was able to do that in the faith, in something that was not easy.
Yeah. Wow. You talk about a transition. So here's what I really want, Drew. I want the men to get off this podcast and say, that's how.
Mm,
That's how I consistently stay calm, because what I think you just did is you from a high level, right? You're like, hey, overall, this was the overall feeling that I got from my stepdad. He was, and to use your words, consistently. There wasn't ebbs and flows. There wasn't roller coaster rides. Consistently calm, patient, and you probably felt very safe in that environment, especially coming from where you came from. I would love for you to share maybe one or two examples of what that consistency felt like to you, whether it was a situation where you maybe got in a little bit of trouble and he was able to exercise some of that calm and patience, or whether, it was just something else, just something he would just do from day to day that just really, really hit home for you that this man is consistently patient. He's consistently calm. I feel safe here. But I would love for you to maybe share, like I said, one or two examples. That way, when the guys hear this podcast, they're like, oh, I can go do that.
mhm.
So what were some of those things?
I'd say the first thing is, my mom and I would often butt heads,
Okay.
and those butting heads would sometimes, create yelling, create a little bit of intensity in the home. And rather than ratchet up his own intensity, he would do the opposite. He would like just be calm, listen, observe, never try to jump in, never try to like fix the problem. He would almost like let us almost like duke it out till we were like done. And then he would come in very calmly and just check in, you know, how are you doing? Or he would, spend the time connecting with my mom and finding out how she's doing. If absolutely necessary, he would step in as the voice of reason and the voice of calm in those moments of intensity. And I think because we both had trust with him, we could both respond better to him than we could respond to each other. But he never tried to jump in, take it over, overpower. He just stayed back and observed. That'd be one example. Another one was probably when I was maybe 16. Legal drinking age in Canada is 19, so a little bit younger. And I said, hey, we're going out to this party. It's high school, a bunch of friends. And, so we talked, and he talked to me. He's like, hey, people are probably maybe going to be drinking. What are your thoughts? I said, well, yeah, I kind of want to drink too. He's like, well, okay, I'll go with you. I will get you some beer and you're going to call me when you need a ride home, whatever that is, no matter when, no matter what time. He's like, you call me and I'm coming to get you. So there's no questions asked. Don't worry. I'm not beating you up. I'm saying, okay, go, be responsible. And when you need me, you call and I'll be there. And I did. And I called him
How
and he
drunk
came and
did
picked
you
me up.
get?
Well, for 16 and first time really drinking, um, probably more drunk than I should have, but not crazy.
Yeah.
I think I've always had a little bit of an ability to use some good judgment even
Yeah.
at a young age. And but I was drunk enough to know that okay, I need some help here. I should probably call him. And so he came, he picked me up, and he didn't even, he could tell like I was probably talking a mile a minute in his ear, right? Because normally I wouldn't be talking that much, but I was the whole ride home. And I think he just sat there probably smiling and thinking, I'm glad I picked him up, because he didn't chastise me. He didn't tell me I was wrong. Then he ended up talking to me afterwards, like, so what was that like for you? And what was your experience? And it's important that if you know what that feels like, you got to make good decisions. And so I'm here for you whenever you need me.
There's a lot of really cool things there, man. So I'm sure some of the listeners are going to be like, I can't believe that guy went ahead and enabled him to drink underage and that kind of thing. Which, what you just said was controversial, right? At the same time, but it's also an incredible example of creating a psychological safe environment. It's interesting you share that story. So I've been doing a lot of speaking this year,
Okay.
and obviously a lot of coaching within our mastermind group. And one of the things that I've really been teaching our guys here lately, and even from the stage, is how to create that environment of psychological safety, which is
So
what you,
important.
yeah, it's so important, which is what you had with your dad. And one thing that I always share when I share these strategies, because sometimes people will be like, because and for the privacy of my kids, I'm not going to share some of the things that my kids have shared with me. But growing up, what I can tell you, some of the things they've shared with me would have been met with like, what's wrong with you? How dare you? Shame on you. Like, why would you do that? Why would you think that? Like, why would, we don't do that in this house, shame, guilt, blame, pain, all those things. And then basically you're making a mental note as a kid of like, okay, well, I'm not telling you anything anymore. And, but here's the example I've been using doing speaking and coaching is when you create a psychological safe environment for your kids, right? It's not the absence of discipline. It's not the absence of consequences. You can enforce natural consequences, right? And it's actually more powerful if you do, but here's what I want. When I am consistent, we're going to use that word over and over again in this interview, consistently creating that space for my kids, because there's going to come a time when my kids have a choice. And I always hold up my phone when I'm doing this coaching, where my 17-year-old son is going to drink too much at a party, and he's going to have one of two decisions to make as he looks at his phone. Do I call my dad and ask for a ride home because I know I've had too much? Or do I roll the dice, drive home anyway, and hope to God my dad never finds out, which could end up in him getting killed? I always tell people as I'm coaching, I am in this for the distance. I'm in this for the marathon. These are not sprints to me. So every time I put in a rep of a situation where I have the opportunity to create psychological safety, like your stepdad did with you, I'm going to take that road because of exactly what you just said. God forbid you would have gone to that party. You would have drank somebody else's beer. And then you probably would have gotten behind the wheel had he not set you up for that, and a long history of consistently being calm, the voice of reason. And because of that, you probably respected the hell out of this guy, right? Which caused you to be treated as an adult and to have a conversation as adults would. So, right, wrong, or indifferent, whether people think it's controversial or not, I would love for you to share, what did that moment and that experience do for you guys as far as maybe even taking your relationship to the next level?
Yeah, I mean, so well said, and I couldn't agree more with what you're sharing with people in that important message. So what it did for me is it just let me know that, one, he's on my side. He's got my back, and even if our taking some steps that maybe we shouldn't, we're doing it in the confines of this safe environment. You can fail, and it's not going to be catastrophic. You can learn, you can get your bumps and bruises, but there's somebody who's going to be there to pick you up, dust you off, say, okay, what did you learn? Now go get it and do it better next time. What do you need to do? And so I think it created a sense of, I can deepening that trust and saying that, okay, here is what it means to be able to, make decisions that are going to be for my best interest, or make decisions that may actually hurt me in the long run. So it actually, I think, grew my capacity to, make better decisions, which I think is ultimately one of our most important roles as parents, is to help our children learn how to make good decisions. You referenced the phone. In that critical moment, are they going to make the right decision that's going to lead to hopefully a much longer, healthier life? Or are they going to make a decision that could lead to some catastrophe? So I think that's really what it did for me, that moment, that trust. And, I can make some of these decisions, and I learned the importance of, okay, I can be responsible.
I love that, man. The other thing too is I think if we treat our kids as young, responsible adults, they have a higher probability of operating as such. If we treat them like irresponsible, completely spastic kids that make horrible decisions, well, they're probably going to operate within that realm as too, right? So I love that story. And thank you for sharing that. I want to transition now to, why are you doing the work that you're doing at Dad Central? What's got you so motivated to help
Yeah.
other dads?
Well, becoming a father was, really important to me. And I became a father with twins. So in 2013, twin daughters, identical twin daughters were born. And, it was a pretty transformational experience, significant transition as well. And as I said, I felt compelled to sort of share that story. Even at that point in time, I felt, wow, I want to take and make this experience the best I can. And I feel like I want to help others do that. So, but fast forward though, 2 years later, 2.5 years later, my son was born, and, life just got really hard. And when I say hard, we had, my wife at the time was selling a business. It was a highly contentious process. We'd moved, we bought a new house and moved, kept the old house. So there's a lot of, well, how we're going to navigate that financially. Then my one daughter got diagnosed with some health difficulties. Then there were two untimely deaths. My grandmother died, and then her uncle died. And all of this happened within the span of like 12 months. And what went from, a joy-filled home with the excitement of welcoming and growing a family, became a home that was, for lack of a better word, very challenging. There was not much joy. There was a lot of pain, a lot of, angst. And in that time of the next probably like year and a half, 2 years, the relationship really, I think, revealed some cracks in the foundation. So that relationship at home struggled, the family struggled, and I just saw this life that I'd been working so hard to create crumbling around me. And I guess in that process, I I just doubled down on trying to be the best dad, best person, best husband I could be. I started to, start to invest more in my own personal growth. And part of that was finding the Good Dad Project, finding you, the work that you were doing. And I became part of the Maxwell leadership team. And so I started to think about, okay, how can I grow and apply this leadership thing? And it just didn't feel right for me to go and apply leadership in corporate America. I mean, I was working at a school of business. I was involved in business, but I just didn't feel like it was the right fit. And at the same time as my personal struggles, this professional growth of becoming a leadership coach and trainer and speaker kind of all came together. And then I found you, and I thought, hey, this is what I want to be doing. This is what I'm truly passionate about, both for myself, but also helping and bring other dads along. And I felt like, there's a simple, Proverbs 27:17 says, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. And I thought, if I want to get through this pain and struggle I'm going through, I need other men around me. I need men who are ahead of me, who are further, who are doing more, who are succeeding in the way that I want to succeed, because I didn't really like, as much as I have a great relationship with my stepdad, I didn't feel like he could relate to me in some ways, but in some of these other ways he couldn't. And I didn't have my other father to lean on. So I was like, I feel like a little bit of like a ship without a rudder. And so I felt like I needed to anchor myself. So it's a long story, but ultimately my pain and the struggles and my passion of just wanting to be the best that I could be, drew me to create Connected Dads, which was a coaching training built off of John Maxwell's leadership masterminds, like bringing men together to grow as leaders, to become the best they can be, so they can connect with themselves, connect with their partner, and connect with their children in a way that ultimately creates transformation at home. So that was how I got into this.
Wow. So was Good Dad was I part of that journey like that, like from
Yes, you were.
really? I had
Crucial.
no idea. I'm honored. I mean, wow,
You
that's
are the inspiration behind me saying, oh man, this guy's doing exactly what I want to be doing. And I thought, well, if he's doing it, then maybe I can try doing it. So
heck yeah.
truthfully, you were the first one I found who was doing it in a way that I saw a transformation happening. So credit to all the work you were doing, because I was seeing it happening. And I thought, man, I want to join, I want to jump on that train.
Well, I'll tell you what, man. First of all, I'm just beyond honored. I didn't know you were going to say that, but number two, I applaud you for saying yes to that calling, because most of the time people will ignore that. I'm too busy for that. I'm too afraid to do that. What happens if I fail? Like all these things that scare us into not taking any action at all. And I just love the fact that you just took the action and did it, because to say yes to that is one of the most powerful moments that we have. The other thing too is the iron sharpens iron. Drew, you know as well as I do that most men are walking the earth and they're living a life of isolation. Now let's really reframe what isolation means. I'm not talking about like you're in, you're Andy Dufresne in Shawshank Redemption in the hole, right? When no one around you in the darkness and people sliding 3 meals under your door 3 times a day, but mentally and emotionally in the hole. And what I mean by that is it doesn't even have to be even a depressing or desperate or, isolating feeling. But here's how it shows up. Most of the relationships that grown men have are acquaintances, or as Stephen Mansfield says, who wrote the book Building a Band of Brothers, rusty relationships, basically relationships that have no depth. They have no polish. They have no oil to them, right? They have they talk about the same three safe things. Hey, how's the family? Good, fine, busy, right? How's work? Great. How are you? Busy, I'm busy, right? And that's about as far as we go. But when it comes to everything that we go through as fathers, iron sharpens iron, having a community of like-minded people that only want the best for you and you want the best for them. It's a community of contributors. It's a community of people who are wanting to learn more, right? I honestly think, man, if more men have that in their lives, we would see a drastic improvement in life fulfillment. I think we would see a huge improvement with the feelings of depression, anxiety. The number two killer for men between the ages of 25 and 52 is suicide. I think we would see a huge drop in that. Now, most people, I'll share with you too, that iron sharpens iron, right? They when if we're saying no to that, right? Or if we're saying I don't need that, usually that comes from an ego. And when I say ego, I'm not talking about like, oh, I'm just better than that. I'm the man, I'm the myth, I'm the legend. What I am talking about is, well, if I can't do it on my own, the lone wolf is strong. If I can't do it on my own, oh my God, I'm broken. I'm weak. I'm this, I'm that. Like, so if I say yes to a community, like, how weak am I? And I would say it's the opposite. How strong are you that knowing you can't do it on your own? How strong and courageous are you for saying yes to something like that? And once you say yes to something like that and you are put in to a community, or if you have a group like that, it is one of the most empowering feelings out there. And I know this sounds like I'm talking about Dad Edge Alliance, but I'm also talking about this. Like, listen, if you've got a group of guys, I have a 7-man group, a Bible study I meet with every single Thursday morning at 7 a.m. These guys, I love doing life with these guys. And I know I could pick up the phone at any moment and be like, hey man, things are going crazy. And I just need a minute, to get some advice. And just not that I would use that on a daily basis, but knowing that I have that makes me feel more empowered, makes me feel more confident, knowing that I don't have to trudge through the waters of parenting and marriage on my own. I think that's what most men are missing. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, what it is very well said. How you just described the the challenges and but the benefits of being connected in real relationship. And that's where I come from. Ultimately, my belief is that we're created for a relationship, and the stronger and healthier the crucial relationships in our lives, the better we all are. I think it was that statement that's been made. A rising tide lifts all boats. It's just the idea that collectively, like when one of us improves, we can all improve. And so there's that idea of when you're in a group where there's somebody who's performing at a high level, you get challenged, you get brought to a higher level. There's also a lot of research around performance that I think ties into what you're talking about. And but anyways, I don't want to talk maybe about that. I think that there's a lot of validity, a ton of validity to what you're saying. And for me, the core that I come back to is that idea of strong, healthy relationship. And it takes courage to get there. It takes work to get there. You have to go beyond those three safe areas that you can talk with any man, and you have to actually get a little bit vulnerable to create real authentic relationship where you're not feeling judged, you're not feeling nervous, you're not feeling condemned, you're feeling actually seen, heard, and valued for who you are, but also challenged or held to a higher standard that you can be better. Because sometimes the hardest part of being in a relationship with another person is seeing yourself for who you really are. And sometimes we don't like that. Most times people don't like to see it. We think about raising kids, and your kids trigger you because they're actually a mirror. They're holding up that mirror to what's actually going on inside of you. And you're like, man, that I know where that came from. That's me. And I don't like that. And so that's hard because community or close, real, authentic relationship brings that out. And I think many people are afraid of that. It's scary. And they don't know if they have what it takes to be able to work through it. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges is many men struggle to believe that they can actually, be good husbands, be good fathers. They're afraid, they're terrified. And so the fear keeps them locked into a prison, and they take on bad habits. They continue to sabotage themselves. They struggle with that.
I totally agree. And I just had on Sathya Sam, who is kind of an interesting name, but I just had him on last week, and he talked about overcoming porn and the best way to navigate any type of anything that's fighting you, an obstacle, or maybe any goal that you want to achieve, right? Or anything that you want to do big in life. It all stems back to connection to other human beings who have a shared vision or shared goals that you do, right? Because when we always say this in the groups, but if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And that is absolutely true. I mean, because there was another one of my very dear friends and also one of our coaches in Dad Edge, Jake Herbert. Jake Herbert, if you Google Jake, he's been working for me now for I guess about 2 years now. He's our director of client success in our business owner dad mastermind. Jake won the silver medal in 2012 in the Olympics for wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
He won 9 national championships, and then was the number one seed to win the gold medal in 2016. Unfortunately, in the Olympic trials, he lost his very last match by points and wasn't able to. But that was like literally, he was like the golden boy for 2016. After that, he retired. But he spent literally 30 years of his life wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
So all the thousands of hours of coaching, the community that he had through the team, he was trained by some of the best wrestling coaches on the planet. And there's one quote that he lives by: have somebody who's teaching you.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody who's 3 people in your life, somebody who's mentoring you, right? Somebody who's teaching you, someone who's already paved the way for the success that you want. Have that person or that community in your life. The second person or community is equals. Have someone that you are equal with, that you're sharing the journey with and learning with, because those two relationships will complement each other. They're going to learn different things that they can contribute to you and vice versa. And then have someone that you are mentoring, someone you are teaching. So someone ahead of you, somebody with you, somebody a little bit behind you. And what that does is it really helps us hone and live a fulfilling life because we're constantly learning. And then if we get to teach the things that we're learning, we master them. But we can't do that if we don't have community. We can't do that if we don't have those people in our life. If we are the only ones in our life that are having these deep connections and these deep conversations and fulfilling accountability and all these other things, we're not going to live that fulfilling life if we don't have that. But I want to kick this back to you as far as who are the people that are mentoring you in your life right now, and what are you learning?
Yeah. Well, John Maxwell has been a mentor for me since probably 2011. And I don't know John personally, but he's mentored me through his books, through being part of the Maxwell leadership team, and through just listening to him speak and teach, and just observing his life. So he's one who's a perpetual mentor for me. The other is similar to you. You said you had a group of 7 men that you meet with on a weekly basis. There's a group of 7. I think there's 7 of us. We meet on a monthly basis, and we are. It's actually part of a program. It's called Radical Mentoring, and we do a book, every month. We're in conversation about what we're learning. We're meeting actually on our own outside of that group, so it's creating this community where we're learning and growing and challenging each other on a regular basis. So that's another mentor for me. And, I would say the final, mentor in my life might sound strange is circumstance. And circumstance is teaching me about myself. And the circumstance that I find myself in now that's mentoring me is that I'm in a high conflict separation and I'm dealing with a broken relationship at the same time as having a new relationship and a new family moving forward. And so it's that circumstance is teaching me and mentoring me in, I think, many areas of just who I am as a man, my faith in particular, and just the personal growth that's required to navigate this process and be what my children need and model for them the character that I referenced that I have seen modeled from my stepdad, modeling the character of how to rise above circumstance and live, your best life that you referenced.
So circumstance. So are you looking at, so like your challenges that you have going on right now? Are you looking at those challenges as teachers? Those circumstances as teachers?
100%. You know, if I don't look at it as teacher, I would probably get caught in a pretty negative, unhealthy cycle. And so I'm looking for the purpose that's in this pain that I'm going through. I'm looking for what is the lesson, the growth that is going to catapult me beyond this circumstance and into a place where it's a much better for me and it's much better for all those around me. And I'm closer aligned with my ultimate purpose and how I can achieve the goals that are, part of that purpose.
Even as you said that, whenever we're thinking about pain in our life, it's what is this pain trying to teach me? Because what we'll do is we'll focus so much on the pain and the emotional part of the pain. And it's all about the pain, the pain. This is awful. When is this going to end? This is horrible. Right. And I think what we do when we do that is we're throwing kerosene on a small campfire. It's making that fire hotter. It's making that pain more intense.
Mm.
But even as you said that, even your voice tone was just like, what is this pain or what is this season of my life trying to teach me right now? And being very vigilant of being curious. Chris Voss, he is the former chief hostage negotiator for the FBI. He came on the podcast and shared a quote that we put on our social. We actually did it in one of those reels. And he said, if you're curious, if you're in a state of mind of curiosity, it's actually impossible to be angry. So if you're actually in the state of mind of like, what is this trying to teach me? I'm very curious about it. I'm open to seeing what this is trying to teach me versus I'm so angry about it, which are two totally different states and one can't exist in the other. Curiosity will trump your anger and it'll trump your resentment, right? And did you learn that from somebody or is this just through your own experience?
I just think it's through my own experience, but Chris Voss was actually one of my three favorite shows that you've done. And Chris and his teaching has been a crucial lifeline for me through my high conflict challenge. And not only because of the growth that it requires in you, but also the tactics that are included in terms of how you communicate. Right. So, yeah, absolutely. That is, I think, a function of various experiences and pain that I've experienced through my life and reflecting on and learning from the previous pain, but also navigating this current pain um, to come through it the healthiest, the more whole, and as I said, really the best that I can be for my three children who are the ones who need me the most through this time.
Man, I have never heard a story quite like yours, Drew. It's it's really, really fascinating. Um, you know, how you've been able to overcome and how you've just navigated life, and you've done it with just such calm. As we wrap up here, I want to wrap up here with a statement, and I just want to get your reflections on it. And then I want to give you some time to obviously share where men can connect with you and what you're doing over at Dad Central. But we have a choice. We have a choice. We can use our past experiences to prove that we're going to be a victim, and we're prove that life is going to just throw us a, you know, for lack of better words, a shit sandwich. And there's nothing we can do about it. It's just what we're destined to be. And this is just how life is. Right. And anybody with a past like yours, or even a past like mine, they probably give you a bit of a forgiveness for that. They'd give you a little pass for that. Be like, yeah, man, it's rough childhood. Like, no wonder you can't show up. I get it. Or you can stake a flag in the ground and say, yeah, this might have happened, but you know what? It was one of the best teachers that I could have possibly had for the life that I truly wanted to create. And I am not standing on the doorstep of victimhood. It's going to be the opposite. You know, so I want to get your feedback on that. And while you think about that, I just want to share a quick story with you. My boys, my two oldest boys, 17 and 15, they know all about my past and that kind of thing. And I talk about it just very nonchalant. I don't talk about it like I'm a victim. And there are times where I'll be telling a story, and I don't tell a story unless they ask. And they'll be like, oh my gosh, man, I feel so sorry for you. And I'm like, don't feel sorry for me. I don't feel sorry for me. Don't spend 1 second pitying me, because you know what? If I would have had an easy cush, you know, silver spoon life, there's no way I would be having, there would probably be very little likelihood that I'd have a connection with you that I do. So I love the fact that I came from absolute craziness. I wouldn't always say that growing up. There was a lot of times it was very dark. I was like, but now that I'm older, I'm like, yeah, man, made me part of who I am. And because of that, I now have this great relationship with my own boys and a good marriage. But what are your thoughts on that we have a choice?
I think that's crucial. As you were sharing that, I reflected on a gift that my mom had given me. I was probably 11 or 12 years old, maybe. And it's a picture frame. I still have it. It might be even behind me now. It's a picture of, and I happen to play football, and so it was a picture of a football lineman's hands, wrapped up in all this tape, and then there's mud and dirt and grit, and it's kind of, you just see these hands, and then there's a simple statement underneath it. It said, "Champions are rarely chosen from the ranks of the unscarred." And to me, that really embodies what you're talking about. In order to rise to that level, the adversity that you're going to go through, the pain that you're going to experience, it can either make you or it can break you. And your choice is, what are you going to choose? What do you want to pursue? Do you want to allow this circumstance, this pain, this struggle to break you, or will it make you? And I think, I know you've interviewed a lot of military or combat veterans, or people who have, MMA, like these are and people who have put their bodies, their minds through the ringer, and they've probably even in their lives experienced a ton of it. But I can guarantee you that, it's like the David Goggins, right? Like, I mean, you like it's your choice. Where are you going to take yourself? Are you going to allow this circumstance to define you, or are you going to allow your mind and your will and the steps that you're going to take to carry you through this? And so, it's not easy. There have been many times where I've struggled with self-doubt, with fear, with discouragement, with like, what's the use? But you always have that choice. Are you going to stay in that state, or are you going to find something to carry you through? Are you going to find people who you can connect yourself with, that are going to support you and bring you through that? So it's not something you do alone, but you do have to make that choice yourself.
Totally agree with you, man. This has been awesome, Drew. I want to make sure I want to give you an opportunity to share the best links to connect with you and your podcast and everything you guys have going on over Dad Central.
But thanks so much, Larry. Just love having the conversation and connecting over this,
Me
our shared
too.
passion. So you can find more about us at the Dad Central website. So dadcentral.ca. We do have our podcast, which is called The Dad Central Show. Same, so dadcentral.ca/podcast. And, the goal for us is to, our show is about, tools to raise confident and successful kids, but really it's about coaching men and dads to be the best that they can be in their whole life, so that ultimately that translates into what they're putting into their children. And we have a ton of free resources. Like, that's what, Dad Central is built off of research on child development and how fathers being positively involved can support their children's development. So we've got a bunch of free stuff there that people can go to and access, and hopefully find a benefit to, improve their ability to connect to and relate with their children.
Awesome, man. This was amazing, brother. I really appreciate having you on. Your story is very unique. And I wish you still lived in St. Louis, man. We could go get a cup of coffee,
You know
something.
what? One of these days, I'll make my way to St. Louis because my dad's still there, and he's got to
Nice.
see my kids right now. So when I do, I'll give you a shot, and we'll connect for that coffee.
Well, please do. I'm waiting on my passport. Should actually be in the next couple of weeks, and I'm actually flying up to Toronto to meet with one of my partners up there. He lives I have two partners that actually live up in Ontario, in London, Ontario. But I'll be flying into probably Toronto. So
Nice.
either in or back out. We gotta grab a coffee or something.
That would be fantastic. You just let me know. We'll make it happen.
That sounds great. Well, guys, listen up. I'm going to have all the links in the show notes for you guys to connect with Drew. In this podcast, we hit upon a lot of really fantastic things, staying calm consistently, and how Drew's dad really did that. How to create a psychological safe environment where your kids are going to tell you everything, like Drew shared the story with us when he was 16. Iron sharpens iron, and why that is so important. If you don't have a community in your life, gentlemen, I can't even encourage you enough to make sure you get in community, whether it's ours or somebody else's, or even at your church. Find community. It's so important. And how your circumstances can be your best teachers. And we can leverage curiosity to stay away from anger, to look for those lessons. That's all in thedadedge.com/412 for this show. Again, thedadedge.com/412. Drew, thank you so much for coming on, man, and blessing us with your story and just your strategies on how we can be better men, better husbands, better fathers.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Larry.
You bet. Gentlemen, as always, go out, live legendary. This is how we change the game. Take care.